We need to work. People have to get up now and visualize that horrible scene, and get up and now and start doing something to organize these first responders, only the ones who reside in the cities right along the Atlantic shore. Because these people are going to be the most receptive and most motivated. People in Atlantic City, first responders, firefighters, and emergency medical personnel in Atlantic City, New Jersey, right along the Atlantic shore. In Miami Beach, Daytona Beach, Florida. Where else? Boston, Baltimore. All the cities, large and small, Norfolk, Virginia, that are scattered along the east coast of the Americas. Then they can form a network to warn one another and keep monitoring the conditions. When the scientists with their high-tech, sophisticated sensing instruments, when the scientists at that volcano, the Cumbre Vieja volcano in the Canary Islands, detect an imminent eruption of that volcano, that's when people need to get ready, have a grab-and-run bag filled with quick necessities. Take the family, jump in a car. Of course, you can't sell your house. We're not asking anyone to do something like sell their house. Jump in a car and drive westward. Have a motel planned where you're going to stay at 10, 20, 30, 40 miles westward. Take a day trip or two. Take a day off from work.
Yes, these are called bug-out bags. I'm sorry to interrupt. These are called bug-out bags. We had a guest on about a month ago. His name is Irv Velker. He is part of our show staff. He is retired Special Forces, and he spent 2 hours explaining to us about the essentials for an emergency, what to pack in a bug-out bag, what types of materials you want, food, types of camping materials, flashlights, firearms, just about everything. That MP3 is available on the website. You can listen to that, or you can watch the entire show on our sunskyMysteries.com YouTube channel. And I'm looking over the Google map of the East Coast, and just in Florida, you have Homestead, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Port Lucie, Palm Bay, Merritt Island, Titusville, Deltona, Daytona Beach, and Jacksonville. And those are the only the ones that are just showing up on this resolution of the map. There's literally thousands and thousands of towns and counties along the east coast of the United States that will be devastated. And remember, folks, this isn't just something that's going to like lap up on the shore. This is going to go miles and miles and miles inland, because this thing is going to be huge when, not if, this landmass slides off of the Canary Islands, because it's only being held on there by friction. All it's going to take is a little bit of steam coming out of that volcano to provide a little bit of lubrication, and that thing is going to go right down into the ocean, and the east coast of the United States is going to be gone.
And that's what Dr. Bill McGuire and Dr. Simon Day are saying, that all it takes is the eruption of that volcano to convert the water that's trapped in the rainwater that's trapped in the margins within that volcanic mountain. That rainwater would then vaporize into steam, and it would surely reduce the frictional grip of that western flank, so that the western flank would slide into the ocean like greasing a sliding board and placing a brick at the top of the greased sliding board. It would just slide into the ocean. There would be, they estimate, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology estimates that the tsunami would take about 8 hours to travel from the Canary Islands right off the west coast of Africa to the east coast of the Americas, about 8 hours. Buoys stationed in the ocean would only give us about 3 hours notice. Now imagine people are in their beds sleeping at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's even being alerted. And in many cases, I've got Weather Channel reports where people were furious in Joplin, Missouri, because they didn't hear the sirens, or people really can't blame the warning system, because a lot of cases the sirens do sound and people get so desensitized by hearing sirens that They don't think anything of it. But in a lot of cases, the sirens are not sounding. Well, in any case, even if they did sound, and even if the people were sensitized to them, they would have no way to escape. You can't jump out of your bed, jump in your car with your family, get on the road and expect to even get through the gridlock traffic at all. You have to leave your home a day or two before the actual tsunami occurs. And you can estimate or surmise that a tsunami might occur based upon the instrumentation that they have that would detect an eruption of the volcano. So all these meetup groups, hundreds, thousands of meetup groups along of emergency medical personnel and firefighters along the east coast of the Americas should all hook up together in one big network and connect to the instrumentation and technicians reporting from the Cumbre Vieja volcano in the Canary Islands. And when they get a high alert from them, people need to be told to get out to the citizenry, get the information out to the citizenry. That's going to be a big job in itself. And then once the citizenry gets it, they can make their decision. Do I want to leave? They're saying there's going to be a tsunami. I don't know if there will be or not. I'm just thinking, like, as a Atlantic Shore resident might think. 3 o'clock in the morning, I got an emergency call from this network, emergency responder network, telling me that a tsunami may occur in the next 24 to 48 hours. Do I want to grab the bug-out bag, take the wife and kids, jump in a car at 3 o'clock in the morning? Or it could be in the daytime. Or do I have to come home from work now and grab the family? Should I do that and drive westward, even though a tsunami might not occur? That's the decision that people have to make. But at least they should be given the information.
That is a tough decision. I've got up here on the screen on the Google map, you can see this. We'll go up here to Rhode Island because this is the most, you can see it the best here. This right here, this line that I'm drawing, this is called the continental shelf right here. And it goes all along the coast, outside of the landmass of the United States, North America, around all shorelines around the oceans. When that tsunami hits that continental shelf, it is not only going to get bigger, it's also going to pick up speed. And can you imagine what's going to happen if this thing gets into the Chesapeake Bay, how much that's going to amplify the effects? I mean, it's going to hit Washington, D.C., Columbia, Wilmington, where our guest, John Dinardo, is in New Jersey. It's going to it's going to get to him. So he's talking from his own survival aspect of this. He wants to know if something happens. I mean, what are the average citizen supposed to do? Are they supposed to keep their face glued to the television at all times, seeing if there's been an eruption out there, or should we allow the emergency managers to do it? And my vote goes to the emergency managers, because not everybody in the population is going to be alert to this, and their responsibility is to get people out of there. They might have to use helicopters, trains, or buses, or what have you, to get people the heck out of there. And we saw this garbage in New Orleans during Katrina. Why do we want to go through this again? We don't. I mean, this is going to be the entire East Coast, thousands and thousands of miles, millions upon millions of people. We got to get the word out to these people.
Yeah, there are about 40 or 50 million people who live right along the Atlantic shore of the United States, and not to mention all the poor people unaware along the east coast of Central America, South America, and let's also remember Europe, Portugal, Spain, England, France, all would be inundated by the tsunami wave also. It's just when we say emergency managers, I would not even trust those people who are designated FEMA people, because they're not enough. I mean, they're not. We need more individuals at a grassroots level to be part of the warning system, the alert, the watching and warning system. And that includes people who are trained firefighters, and they're not designated by the federal government. We don't want the federal government taking control of this, because it's corrupt organization, as everybody knows. And things will always be botched when the federal government gets its hands in there. We want the grassroots people. People just without, as an ad hoc group, many groups, to get together. These would be firefighters and people who work in the emergency squad, volunteers who work in your local medical emergency squad, the ambulance that comes over whenever people need help, police officers who are interested in help being part of this warning system, individual citizens, baseball coaches, school teachers, everyone take part in this alert system. It would bring the people together also. So that's what we have to do, and I'm hoping that there are going to be volunteers out there in the audience, people who will get the ball rolling. It's sort of like a pyramid. You know, start rolling that snowball from the top of the mountain and hope that that snowball of information and the public movement begins to gain momentum as it rolls down the mountain of public notice, public opinion, public interest. That's what we need, people out there in your audience to take initiative to do this, and in other audiences too. I guess the first way to do it would be to take this message and have people broadcast it in many creative appeals through you, through your voice, through my voice, through the voice of others. There are many other radio programs that are bringing out the truth to the people. As many other people begin to shout this appeal out, it'll begin to ring louder and louder in the minds of the public until people begin to take action. But it has to be it'll be a growing movement. It'll take time.
Well, we don't have the time.
We don't. But we've got to start now and try to spread this. We could take the audio from this particular broadcast and put clips out and send them out to other people who have other radio programs of their own, who are not controlled, by the power interest, by the money monopoly, who feel free to speak freely, and you get more of that, talk shows, etc. So we've got to propagate this warning, this message, and this plan. If somebody has a better plan, add to this plan. This should not be accepted as the only one. It could be accepted and developed into something even better than what I propose. We've got the same threat on the west coast of the Americas. In the Hawaiian Islands, there is, I forget the name, but one of the islands is becoming top-heavy. And as Professor Gary McMurtry, oceanographer at the University of Hawaii, states, in this tsunami documentary, Dr. Gary McMurtry says that these islands form through repeated volcanic eruptions through over hundreds and thousands of years. And it's like, I visualize it as sort of an ice cream cone, okay? You put 1, 2, 3 scoops on top of an ice cream cone, it becomes top-heavy. These eruptions form, and where there was no island at all in the Pacific, in the Hawaiian Islands, all of a sudden a new island forms thousands of years ago. And then repeated volcanic eruptions, because remember, it's a pimple of magma erupting through the very deep seabed of the ocean, and it begins to build up magma, and the Hawaii is volcanic matter. That's what the Hawaiian Islands are, volcanic lava that has hardened. And it builds up more and more like a 3-scoop ice cream cone. And Professor Gary McMurtry goes on to say that the base of these islands becomes eroded from the water because it's underwater, and the moving water erodes the base so that it becomes very narrow, like the bottom point of an ice cream cone. And eventually that ice cream cone island topples into the ocean, causing a horrendous tsunami. Again, the scientists tell us that landslide-driven tsunamis are many times higher in amplitude than the standard or more common undersea earthquake-driven tsunamis, like the one we saw in Asia, in the Indian Ocean, that struck Thailand in the Christmas of 2004. That was a horrendous tsunami, but the one that would occur from a landslide, an island plopping into the ocean, that tsunami would be many times greater in amplitude. So the West Coast has to do the same thing. So you can see why we need listeners out there to take the initiative to start getting this information out, and perhaps write up their own little appeal. Sit down and carefully, people out there who are good writers, write up a very, very carefully composed appeal and brief that would be read on the air and distributed in print form, in Twitter, Facebook, meetup groups, all kinds of social media. The Weather Channel is doing such nonsense. I mean, it's wonderful what they're doing. They're not presenting social media frequently throughout the broadcasting day. And they say, well, this person had a Twitter, Facebook, and they said this about weather in Cleveland, and this other person in Austin said something about the weather. And it's all silly nonsense, like, oh, I wish it would rain, or stop the rain, or some stupid thing like that. But the idea is they're using the social media to publicize people's thoughts. So people out there who are listening, get onto the social media with the Weather Channel and through other mass media, and even even free media like Bill Zam and his broadcast. And let's continue to propagate our appeals in our own way, in many different ways, by many different people.
Yes.
So I guess I've spent a lot of time on this, but it's more important. Actually, the life-saving effort is more important than the entire fascinating story of Planet X, multifaceted story of Planet X. It's more important to organize and motivate people.
Yes, definitely. The survival aspects of this are incredible, I would put forth. The people being able to survive this sort of thing. I'm sorry, I'm reading the production chat.
Well, it's okay.
The staff is going crazy.
This happens every time Planet X comes in. You see, I didn't get a chance to get into what Bill had asked me at the beginning, when that was, why does this thing come in? They say it comes in every 36 and a half centuries, approximately, every 36 and a half centuries. And before we get to why it occurs punctually and predictably every 36 and a half centuries, these global disasters, before we get into why it happens, on this BBC documentary, one of them that I was watching, they knew nothing about Planet X. They knew nothing about the global catastrophes occurring every 36 and a half centuries. But one of their comments was, quote, about 4,000 years ago, the island of Réunion, off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, collapsed into the ocean and caused a horrific tsunami about 4,000 years ago. And automatically I thought to myself, oh, that was Planet X, because 36 and a half centuries is close enough for their rough estimation was 4,000 years ago.
Right.
So we know it was caused by the trauma that is exerted upon the entire planet Earth and all the other planets in the solar system when this object comes in. And I didn't get to the point, some of the major points, and that is that this object never hits Earth. So I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify any misimpressions that people might have that this thing will collide with Earth. It does not collide with Earth as depicted in the movie Melancholia, which is out now. You should see that movie. I have yet to see it. But it passes by. The reason is it is being gravitationally sucked in by the sun. Think of the sun as a huge magnet, and Planet X, a magnet laying on your kitchen table that would be analogous to the sun. And Planet X would be like a ball bearing, a steel ball bearing, lying somewhat near that magnet on the kitchen table. And if that steel ball bearing is close enough to be within the outer fringes of the gravitational, I should say the magnetic force field of that magnet, very slowly that ball bearing will begin to roll toward the magnet. And very soon, in a matter of a couple seconds, the ball bearing will pick up speed and accelerate until it flies directly into the magnet. Well, that's what is happening with this Planet X, but it's not a magnetic force of attraction. It's a gravitational force of attraction. And fortunately, it does not strike the sun. but it loops around the sun. The reason it doesn't strike the sun is because there's a scientific belief that there is such a phenomenon as repulsion forces. When two very large bodies get close to one another, they repel one another. So this object is looping around, and it's very interesting. I have an article that actually sort of verifies that right from the U.S. News and World Report magazine, the third largest news magazine in the United States, U.S. News and World Report. I photocopied this article, and I put that out on the internet too, the actual article.
What's that called?
September 10th, 1984, U.S. News and World Report, Planet X. Hey, they call it Planet X, so it's not a phony name because it was stated as Planet X. Is it really out there? Quote, U.S. News and World Report, shrouded from the sun's light, mysteriously tugging at the orbits of Uranus and Neptune, is an unseen force that astronomers suspect may be Planet X, a 10th resident of the Earth's celestial neighborhood. Last year, the infrared astronomical satellite, IRAS, circling in a polar orbit 560 miles from the Earth, detected heat from an object about 50 billion miles away that is now the subject of intense speculation. Quote, all I can say is that we don't know what it is yet, says Jerry Neugebauer, director of the Palomar Observatory for the California Institute of Technology. Scientists are hopeful that the one-way journeys of the Pioneer 10 and 11 space probes may help to locate the nameless body. And my comment is they send out these space probes, Pioneer 10 and 11, Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11, to see if there would be any gravitational pulling on the trajectory of Pioneer 10 as Pioneer 10 traveled beyond the outer planets into deep space toward the direction where the mathematical calculations suggested that this mysterious gravitational pulling force existed. They wanted to get it close to this mysterious gravitational pulling force to see if the Pioneer 10 would swerve or veer off of its trajectory, and indeed it did. They didn't publish it, but it's been known by scientists that that's what happened, so they detected the gravitational pull. Anyway, continuing on with the article, some astronomers say the heat-emitting object, this huge body is a heat-emitting object. It's an unseen, they say it's an unseen collapsed star or possibly a brown dwarf, a protostar meaning the beginning of a star, a forming star that never got hot enough to become a star. However, a growing number of astronomers insist that the object is a dark gaseous mass that is slowly evolving into a planet. For decades, astronomers have noted that the orbits of two huge, distant planets, Neptune and Uranus, their orbits deviate slightly from what they should be according to the laws of physics. Gravitational pull from Planet X would explain that deviation. Well, that's the end of the essence of that article.
Yes,
from
I have that
U.S.
up on
News
the
and World
screen.
Report.
I have that up on the screen right now, along with the diagram from the article that shows the solar system.
There you go. And they're showing something that's not exactly a perfect diagram, but they are showing a diagram with Planet X way out there, and they're showing the trajectory, and the trajectory is shaped like a bicycle chain. And Planet X would be at the, basically at the rear wheel sprocket wheel of the bicycle, and our sun would be the pedal sprocket wheel of the bicycle, if you can visualize that. So the sun would be the pedal sprocket wheel, Planet X would be the rear wheel sprocket wheel, and the bicycle chain would describe the elliptical orbital path of Planet X toward the sun, being drawn into the sun toward that bicycle pedal, and around, looping around the bicycle pedal, which would be the sun. So here we've got tremendous evidence, and then they suppressed it. They wouldn't even talk about it. Here we have the largest celestial body, what they call a new member of our solar system, and nobody's ever mentioned it. There again, President Nixon was right when he said it's not the crime that incriminates these high-level criminals. It's their cover-up that incriminates them. Sure enough, it's the cover-up is dirty fingerprints of the cover-up all over the place.
Yes.
So we know it's coming, folks. Denial will only get you killed.
Yes. There's been articles about this for years and years and years and years, and now all of a sudden there's nothing about it. And that is what is most telling to those of us that follow this story and this information and the events as they become more and more apparent. All of the earthquakes, the sinkholes, the volcanoes, the storms and everything. And you're even seeing some of the effects on the sun with the increased sun effect, even though a lot of that is probably a regular solar cycle. But
you know, the Bible predicts this in Revelation chapter 16. The Bible predicts that the sun will get so hot it will scorch men. And men in the book of Revelation, another chapter 6, I believe, men are hiding themselves under the rocks and the caves. Everyone is scurrying to go underground for shelter, to hide themselves, it says, from the wrath of the Lamb. The Lamb is the sacrificial Lamb, the Lord Jesus Christ. So the Bible is saying Jesus is the one who is causing this. Now, the word Jesus, we have to understand, the people really have that name has been so misused. Let's give it its English translation. The Hebrew name Yeshua, Jesus, actually means, and let's put it in English, God the Savior. So he claimed to be God the Savior when he came to earth. He gave a vision of the future after he had returned to heaven. He gave it to John, his apostle, when John was an old man, exiled on the island of Patmos at the age of around 95 years old. John got these visions and was told to write them down in the book of Revelation. And all the disasters that we see occurring now and that we have seen described in the book of Exodus are beginning to repeat themselves. They describe Jesus in heaven, says what's going to happen at the end to come is there's going to be earthquakes all over the place. That's what he says in several different places of the Bible. The Lord Jesus specifies this. There will be earthquakes all over the place. Now, that's what we're having. He says there will be a great earthquake that will eventually come and shake every mountain and island in the world. Maybe not disrupt everyone, but shake the entire earth. He says there will be scorching caused by the sun, solar scorching that will cause so much heat that men will go hide themselves under the rocks underground. And sure enough, we have the United States government and the power elite, the people who have usurped power, lying to us and scurrying to save their own hides while they leave all of us to fry on the surface of the earth, keeping this secret, all their underground cities. They've been documented. A man, a courageous whistleblower, who knew he was going to be killed for speaking out, Philip Schneider, was murdered for speaking about this. And you can see Philip Schneider, Schneider. Some of his speeches may still be on the internet, in video form. He was a geologist, a very high-level geologist, and communications. He communicated with government leaders of governments around the world on the issue of these underground cities, these trillion-dollar underground cities that have been constructed. And what he, as Marshall Masters, published in his book, Planet X Forecast and 2012 Survival Guide, quoting Philip Schneider.
What's the video below?
There were 129 underground facilities all over the world. And these facilities, one of them is Cheyenne Mountain in the mountains of Colorado around Denver. Now, here's some more telling evidence, and this is it's so powerful that people will be shocked and a little bit scared to know that the Central Intelligence Agency moved their headquarters from Langley, Virginia, near the East Coast, near the tsunami-prone East Coast of the United States, way out to Denver, where the underground cities are located. the Environmental Protection Agency moved their headquarters from Washington, D.C. out to Denver. So all the people in power are moving out inland away because they know the tsunami is going to strike the East Coast. They're not telling people. They figure, well, let everybody get killed. I mean, they want to thin out the population anyway. And simultaneously, they do not want to disrupt the economy with any alarming information. So they're going out to save their hides underground. They've got our tax money that we worked very hard for, and they squeezed it out of our blood to pay for these lavish underground cities. So that's your government for you. We've got to take our own initiative and protect ourselves. The solar scorching will be coming. It's obvious that it will be coming. The National Academy of Science. If you go to YouTube and look up Jesse Ventura, Apocalypse 2012, type that into YouTube, you'll get all 6 episodes. Watch episode 6 first, but then watch the whole thing again. That Jesse Ventura True TV presentation. Now, they took him off of True TV because he was giving out too much truth on True TV. True TV was getting to be too true for their own liking. But you can still see it on YouTube. You need to see it. The underground facilities where they've got our tax money to funding these highly trained military troops to defend that facility against panicking public Coloradans trying to find safe refuge from the coming solar scorching. They have huge multi-ton steel blast doors to block off that facility so that nobody from the public can get in. That's what they said right in this. The Chief of Security, Colonel Wynn, W-Y-N-N, stated that our troops are trained to protect this facility no matter who, whether it's citizens or not. We're going to protect this facility, and when those steel blast doors are closed, he said, you can knock all day long. You're not getting in. Go watch that. So the government is protecting themselves from the solar scorching. Again, take note of this. Get the movie Knowing, 2009, Knowing, Knowing, starring Nicolas Cage. That movie warns us of the coming solar scorching. In the movie, you have the people watching the television, and the government is saying, government spokesmen on TV are saying, we cannot protect you, we cannot do anything to help you. Just dig. All we advise is you dig as deep as you can to protect yourself from the scorching that's coming from the sun. As this object, the celestial object, gets closer, the sun becomes more and more electrically and magnetically excited. It's becoming excited already, and the sun then consequently spews out tremendous solar flares and coronal mass ejections, electric particles, protons and electrons, blasted out in what is normally the solar winds, but in a hyperactive hyperactive emissions of solar winds that are so intense they strike Earth's magnetic field. The Earth's magnetic field is like the face mask of a football player. Protects the football player from being smashed in the nose. Similarly, Earth's magnetic field protects Earth from being smashed by these streaming electrified blasts from the sun that would otherwise cause great havoc and destruction on Earth. Well, now Earth's magnetic fields are being destroyed. In fact, as Larry Joseph, the scientist on Jesse Ventura's Apocalypse 2012 TV program mentions, Larry Joseph says that they sent up 5 Themis, Themis satellites, weather satellites, into space. Fortunately, these Themis space satellites lofted up through the Earth's atmosphere and into space just at a moment when the Earth's magnetic field happened to be collapsing. A great hole appeared, a huge hole, larger than the diameter of Earth appeared. Remember, the magnetic field is bigger than the Earth itself. That's the invisible spherical magnetic field. And thus those Themis satellites were able to detect the parting and the disruption, breakup of the Earth's magnetic field. That's like a football player taking off his face mask when somebody is coming straight at his face. That's what Earth is facing, no pun intended. We have, as a result, now the Earth's jet stream is being totally contorted. Ever since 2004, I've been videotaping Weather Channel reports, and I see the jet stream becoming distorted because of these solar blasts. And also there's another phenomenon that's causing it, something inside the Earth's molten iron core. Because I've done some studying on the best theories of how the Earth's magnetic field is generated. And from what I've been studying, it's the swirling action of the molten iron core, magnetic material. It's a molten magnet that swirls sort of like a bowl of water on a spinning potter's wheel. As long as the potter's wheel is undisturbed, the water surface of that spinning, rotating bowl of water will remain smooth. It'll have a depression in the center, but it'll rotate smoothly around the outer edges. And likewise with the Earth, the molten iron core of the Earth swirls around like water in a spinning potter's wheel. And the movement of these magnetic iron molecules causes, electric charge in motion. Well, the electrons in the outer valence bands of all the metal iron molecules in Earth's core, these electrons constitute a huge stream of swirling electrons in that analogous bowl of spinning water. Now, when you have electrons in motion, basic physics principles that I studied years ago when I was studying physics to become a science teacher, and you'll find this in any physics textbook. Electrons in motion, or any electric particles in motion, will generate a magnetic field that billows out, surrounds the path of that traveling electrical charge. And visualize this, a stream of cars going through a tunnel. Inside the tunnel, each car represents an electron. And as the cars are moving in a straight line through the tunnel, it generates a tunnel, a circular tunnel wall around the path of the cars. And the circular inner wall of the tunnel takes the very same shape as an invisible magnetic field generated by a stream of electrons or protons. So you have these streams of electrical particles blown out by the sun constantly, now in ever more fierce and intense waves. These are causing, what they do is they impinge upon Earth's magnetic field. Sort of like if you were to take a chopstick, each one of those streams of particles is like a bundle of chopsticks or bundles of porcupine needles that are shot out from the sun. These are electrified porcupine needles shot out toward the Earth. And the Earth's magnetic field is like an invisible, but a bird cage, a rotating bird cage, with an invisible vertical bars. When you have these electrical streams piercing these bars that are rotating, the vertical bars on the bird cage, planet Earth, the bars or the Earth's magnetic field, become shocked, jolted, jerked. And that is what causes the jolting of the Earth in its rotation. When the Earth is jolted in its smooth rotation, it's like someone carrying a tray of Jell-O with pineapple slices floating on top of the Jell-O. And then their elbow of the person carrying the Jell-O is jarred. And all of a sudden, the Jell-O starts to shimmer and shake, and the pineapple slices laying on top of the Jell-O begin to bump into one another. Those pineapple slices are like the Earth's 12 tectonic crustal plates. The Jell-O beneath the pineapple slices is analogous to the magma, the molten rock beneath the crust of the Earth. So every time these electrified blasts from the sun strike the Earth's magnetic field, the Earth is jerked and jolted in its rotation. Irregularities occur, and you have earthquakes. So there you go. There's the science of why the Earth electrified blasts from the sun cause earthquakes, and I've never seen that principle described by anybody. But it still is basic physics, so why aren't all these PhD astrophysicists telling us about this? Don't they know it themselves? So anyway, but I'm telling you, that's basic physics. Whether somebody has stated it or not, that's exactly what happens. And you can prove it too. The operation of a motor, an electrical motor, operates on that very same principle. You have a current is run through an electrical wire inside a motor. The wires all coil up, but still the principle is the same. Electrical current goes through the wire. The wire is located close proximity to a permanent magnet. So you have the magnetic field of the electrical current generated by the electrical current. That magnetic field, electromagnetic field, interacts, pushing and pulling against the permanent magnetic field. And that's what causes the motion, the rotational motion of a motor. So that principle is widely known. Anyway, that's what the sun's doing, and the sun's going to become more excited because it's being electrically excited by this brown dwarf star, which is saturated with electrical particles, plasma, protons that are blown out by the sun consistently in the solar winds. The protons travel deep out into space where they reach a point where they cease, and they build up sort of like waves, waves coming into the coast. Are you still there, Bill?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm listening.
Waves lapping the shore. That's what you can compare it to. These waves of electrified protons, I visualize them as red glowing particles. And you might do the same thing because you get a vivid image that way. These waves of red glowing particles lap the shore and build up on the shore. The shore is analogous to the outer boundaries of our solar system, a huge sphere of red glowing plasma encircling like a globe, like a massive globe surrounding the entire solar system. That's called the heliosphere. Helio meaning sun. The sun's blasts of particles building out, causing a mass of positive charge, positive electrical charge. And when this planet X pierces that sphere, that glowing red sphere surrounding the outer bounds of our solar system, that planet X and its accompanying swarm of comets becomes saturated with electrically sticky plasma. So now you've got this electrified body coming in, and it's ready to zap with the sun, because the sun is now predominantly negative since it's blown out so many positive protons and electrons. So now the positively charged planet X has its rendezvous, its electrical flirtation with the sun as it gets closer to the sun, and all of a sudden the close proximity allows it to discharge to the sun, and you get tremendous zapping. And that's what's the result. The response of the sun is to blow out magnetic flares, huge flares of energy and electrified particles, some of them so intense that the entire coronal surface of the sun is blown out in all directions. And we've had some of these coronal mass ejections. So that's why the sun, that's the science behind why the sun is going to go berserk. And this is stated by the National Academy of Science and by the even NASA, but they put it on the back pages. They've made it a very low-keyed report that in 2012, 2013, we're going to see tremendous solar scorching. So that's another thing we have to try to prepare for. I don't think we have the time to talk about preparing for it, but basically it's digging an underground shelter and putting a dome over it, a reflective geodesic dome over the top of it. That dome would serve also as wind protection, because the winds, high winds, are resisted by a dome-shaped structure.
Yeah, we've we've burned through 2 hours here talking about this, between the tsunamis and the solar effects of the incoming bodies. I have been, while you were giving your lecture there, I was going around to various websites and showing the folks the images of the heliosphere, the current sun activity. All of this is, it's easy to find all of this stuff on the internet if people haven't been to these. This is the site we're on right now is the SOHO site, and that is the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory website. And what you're seeing now is actually the magnetometer that is displayed in real time. All you have to do is keep reloading the page, and it changes once every minute. And you can see that the graph has proceeded, and you can see the wave patterns that John was talking about just a couple minutes ago. Because the magnetic waves from the sun come in waves, and there you see the graphic representation of that. I mean, it's a very distinct waveform.
Is it called the Interplanetary Magnetic Field? IMF?
The one that we're looking at right now is the GOES magnetometer, and it's the measurements in nanoteslas.
You know, Bill, I got to read to you. I got this other article. Pope John Paul II. I don't know if we mentioned this last time. Pope John Paul II was in Germany in 1980. I've got the article in front of me. He met with a group of German clerics in a discussion that was covered by a German magazine. The German magazine, that people could write this down and look it up themselves. The word is spelled S-T-I-M-M-E, next word D-E-S, next word G-L-A-U-B-E-N-S. Stimme-Glaubens, something like that. That was the magazine that covered the Pope's visit to Germany in 1980, Pope John Paul. The Pope was asked, quote, "What about the third secret of Fatima? Should it not have already been published by 1960? You see, everybody, Catholics throughout the world, this is my commentary, were in a great fervor in the late 1950s awaiting the revelation of this mysterious third secret of Fatima, given supposedly by the Virgin Mary, but who knows? I believe I've studied enough of this. As a scientist, I'm sure it was an angel of God warning people. This has happened before. It's stated in the Bible. And I've seen cases where people were actually visited by messengers from God. People's lives have been saved by angels of God. My life was saved on the New Jersey Turnpike a number of years ago in a freak accident. I came out of it with nothing. And I look back, I know that was God's protective angels. But anyway, these children in 1917 in Fatima, Portugal, were given this vision, and they were terrified. They were basically in a trance, and so many cases of people in a trance are documented, and we have the television specials narrated by David McCallum on the ABC television network, Ancient Prophecies, Part 1, Part 2, and they mentioned various cases of people who went into a trance and foresaw these great horrific events that God was somehow telling them, warning them about. And they were in a panic when they came out of these trances. And what they described was third secret of Fatima was to be concealed until 1970, and the Catholic Church announced to all the Catholics of the world that this third secret of Fatima would be revealed in 1960. That never happened. So, in 1980, Pope John Paul II was asked at this meeting of clerics in Germany, why hasn't the third secret of Fatima been revealed way back in 1960? And here's the Pope's quote. "It should be sufficient for all Christians to know this. If there is a message in which it is written that the oceans will flood whole areas of the earth, and that from one moment to the next, millions of people will perish, truly, the publication of such a message is no longer something to be so much desired." Unquote. Wow. He really spilled the beans on that one, didn't he?
Yes, he did. A little. I think actually we did cover this on the last time you were here, but it does deserve to be retold. And the audience looking at some of the third secret of Fatima websites while you were talking, and that's a heck of a thing.
Everybody
Malachi
could
Martin
Google
was
the word
involved.
Fulda. That's the name of the town. F-U-L. F as in Frank, U-L-D-A. Pope John Paul II, Fatima. Fulda, Pope, Fatima. F-A-T-I-M-A. Those three words, and you'll get it. I'm sorry, Bill.
Okay, that's fine.
Fulda, F-U-L-D-A. Pope, Fatima, F-A-T-I-M-A. You'll get the reports. I've got some, I had collected a bunch of quotes from ancient historians when they saw this planet coming in. I never did get to the punctuality and regularity of 36.5 century intervals at which this object comes in and causes global devastation. I never did get to that. The reason it comes in punctually like it's actually a celestial pendulum. You know, this you can predict the period of the swing of a pendulum on a grandfather's clock or any other type of pendulum. Well, comets are described by astronomers and astrophysicists as celestial pendula. They come in, a comet comes in every so many years, and we can predict when Halley's Comet will come in every 75 years, and Comet Holmes, I believe, is once every 108 years. So comets are celestial pendulum, and that's why we can predict the period. This is a very long period comet, this huge brown dwarf star, traveling on a cometary orbit. But if you go back 36.5 centuries, you have evidence of global destruction. You have tree rings. Tree rings were very narrowed at around 36.5 centuries ago, pretty close to around 1620 BC. That's what I've read. According to tree rings, a tree ring analysis is very accurate chronologically. So they got it down to around 1620 or 1630 BC. That's almost 1600. It's almost 36.5 centuries ago. Also, confirming that time index of roughly 1630 BC, is the eruption, a massive explosion of the great Santorini volcanic caldera in the Aegean Sea, north of Egypt. And we see the explosion amazingly described in the book of Exodus chapter 9, where God commands Moses and Aaron to scoop up ashes from the furnace, cast the ashes up in the air in the face of Pharaoh and his magicians. And God says in Exodus chapter 9 of the Bible, I will cause the entire land of Egypt to be covered with burning ash. And that's when the great Santorini volcano exploded, according to geologists. They say this was the greatest explosion, according to their geological studies, that's greater than anything we've known in modern history. And the ash cloud drifted south just at that right moment when Moses was commanded by God, who had the time schedule set precisely. Moses was commanded to cast the ashes up in the air in the face of Pharaoh and his magicians, symbolically signaling the advent of this blanket of burning ash coming down over the entire land of Egypt.
And that would have been from the volcano, Santorini.
Yes, or just north of Egypt in the Aegean Sea. Now, we can learn a lot. Folks, please, go to the book of Exodus and start reading about the 10 plagues. The reason I say this, the 10 plagues over Egypt, because we are about to experience those 10 plagues. If you want to know tomorrow's news today, read the book of Exodus. The first thing that happened was the waters turned red. And it was the tail, this huge swarm, this bee swarm of comets and just space debris and rocks and red iron oxide dust gravitationally surrounding this huge brown dwarf star as it passed over Earth on its way to its rendezvous with the sun. As it passed over Earth, it did sort of a shotgun drive-by shooting upon planet Earth. The red iron oxide dust cloud swept the Earth, polluted all the waters. The waters were so bitter. The people couldn't drink it. They would vomit. That's what the Bible says. And we're about to experience that again when this thing passes by. I mean, there's a point where only a spiritual power can save us. We can prepare all we can physically and humanly during the early stages when the disasters are not at their peak intensity. Right. But when they become so intense that no dome home can protect you, there's no way you can get water, there's no way you can protect yourself from the solar scorching, God promises in the Bible, throughout the Bible. Go to Joel, the book of Joel, chapter 2. And if people say, oh, I don't believe that, my answer is, if you don't believe that, you have chosen death. You've chosen to die. God says, if you call out to me, he says, I will create, in the book of Joel, chapter 2, I'll paraphrase it, I will cause pillars of smoke and fire. It'll be a day of great gloom and disaster. The sky will turn black. But anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. He promises to supernaturally protect us. And I'm going to go with that offer. I'm going to take it.
I think a lot of us will, especially when the time comes and this goes to, pardon the phrase, hell in a handbasket, because it's going to.
Now we look at the next events in the book of Exodus. If people think, oh, this is a maybe, it won't happen, it might not happen. Let's go to Exodus, because this object passed by then, and every event that happened then is going to happen again. So the waters turned red, all the fish died. You had dead fish all over the place in Egypt. Then there were diseases. Now the waters caused ecological disaster such that there was an inundation of lice all over the country. And there was also an inundation of frogs. An inundation of frogs. Now, of course, they would grow given the right ecological conditions. But there's a photograph. In fact, you can find it, Bill, and put it out to your people right now. It was in China. There's another reason why frogs would inundate the land. In China, there was an earthquake in 2005. You can put down China earthquake 2008, maybe, yeah, 2008. And frogs were coming out of the ground. So you could do a search on Google search on China earthquake, toads, TOADS, frogs, whatever. You'll get the photograph of people riding their bikes down the street of a city in China, and swarms of frogs are coming out of the ground. Why would that happen? Why would swarms of frogs come out of the ground? And it was a couple of days before the earthquake. That was a signal to the people that an earthquake was going to occur, but the people ignored the signal in their ignorance. And the government knew that there was going to be an earthquake in China, but they didn't announce it, not announce it. So there you go. You can trust your government to withhold the truth that would save your life. Trust the government to allow you to be killed. Frogs are coming out of the ground, and the reason is when tectonic plates begin to shift underground, they begin to butt up against it and rub up and bang up against one another underground. You have hundreds of thousands of tons of rock scraping and scratching and clashing with one another. Now, there is a phenomenon in electronics, in physics, and in electrical principles. We even use this piezoelectric effect in designing various devices in modern day life. Your cigarette lighter. If I don't smoke, but when you use a cigarette lighter you hear the little snap, the crack, that is a crystal being hammered by a tiny little hammer. The impact of a crystal on a crystal generates a voltage, a very high voltage for a very short instant of time, a fraction of a second. High voltage is generated. And that high voltage is what causes a spark to jump across a thin little gap. And that spark ignites the butane in the cigarette lighter. And you have the same principle with the gas stove. Did you ever notice the cracking sound? That is a piezoelectric crystal being hammered to cause a spark, also on your gas grill, which will ignite the gas.
Yep.
So that's what happens under Earth, but it's on a macrocosmic scale. You have hundreds of thousands of tons of rock crashing against one another. So imagine the voltages that would be generated by the piezoelectric effect. These rocks clashing with one another as the Earth becomes disturbed and begins to move onto the ground. Now this high voltage zaps all these underground creatures. You see frogs coming swarming out, scurrying because